Upstream, the Don River is invisible beneath a tangle of roads and railways. The tributaries that fed the river have been suppressed. Nothing but ghosts remain, remnants of vigorous life, like a clump of cattails.
This is rather typical of most of the lost tributaries of the Don River. You can see from the hills up beyond that this was a drainage basin at one time. It flowed down through that drainage basin, through this channel, and out behind us here into the main river. The problem here is there's no water left to make this system work. That water from, in this case, the Rosedale community has all been captured in drains and sanitary sewers that are flushing the water down into the river, but in pipes. So all of the important ecosystem components of a small tributary stream have been lost. The important spawning areas, for example, that the fish would have moved up through the lake that have pools and riffles and rapids that would have been used by the fish for reproduction, those are all gone because there's no longer any water to sustain them.
This stretch of the Don looks more like a natural river. But look again. The water lacks sufficient oxygen to support life. Bob Newberry wants to bring a little wildness back.
So what we'd like to do is confine the flow a little bit, just so that we can get it going through a bit more of a notch here. Yeah, that's right. Well, let's build it up. Let's leave a flat spot in the middle here.
Used to do this all the time as a kid, but what are we doing here?
What we're doing really is creating a small model of what you call creating more diverse flow. By introducing these rocks in here, we've created a barrier that the water has to flow over the top of. And as it accelerates over the top, it picks up air in this face and sweeps it down into the water down below. And as it decelerates now, back into the more classic flow, you can see that there are air bubbles being swept back into the flow. The secondary effect, of course, is when you build these kinds of structures, these are the ideal aquatic insect habitats. These are the places that if you're an insect and you're trying to optimize your feeding efficiency, you would locate on the top of these boulders and little rocks. Because after all, if you think about it, if you've only got a catcher's mitt this big that you have to catch food with, you might as well stick it up where the flow's concentrated and get the most going through it rather than sitting in a pool somewhere. So all of these features, these diverse flow features, come together to produce both habitat for aquatic insects, they reaerate the water, and then the fish are attracted to those areas because this is where most of their food comes from.
So I can see that something like this has tremendous ecological consequences here. But what would happen if we built a really large weir all the way across?
Well, if you do that, of course, what you start to do is change the whole profile of the river going upstream from here. And in a way, it would be recreating what would be here naturally.
What once was here could flourish here again. A marshland fed by spring floods, and the river valley would come alive. The marsh would help break down pollutants in the water, provide habitat and food, and the whole community of life could recreate itself in the heart of the city. Water flowing over the weir would have more energy, would start cleaning up the river more. But solutions here mean nothing unless we protect the river's source. The future of the whole watershed depends on the moraine, and the city is rapidly moving upstream to the headwaters. Garbage is the forerunner. Already the porous gravel soils of the moraine contain one of the largest dumps in North America, and it's nearly full. Where will the next dump go? The city follows close behind, pushing its suburbs up the hillside, stamping its pattern into forest and farmland. It looks neat and tidy, but beneath the asphalt and concrete, beneath the lawns and the chemicals spread on them is the geography of life, the glacial gravel, the moraine reservoirs. Competition for fresh water gives the most innocent pastime a different significance. The Devil's Pulpit golf course was built on the moraine just a few years ago. It needs water to survive. So do its neighbors. Susan Milton is one of several local residents whose wells have started to go dry.
None of these properties had any water problems until the golf course began construction. If it had been 2 wells or even 5 wells, it could have been a coincidence that the dry weather caused the problems. But for 18 wells, both shallow, dug, and bored wells, and this is a drilled well going down 153 feet. Now, all these wells were affected at the same time as the golf course began its heavy irrigation.
We're licensed to pump 200 gallons a minute.
F. Scott Abbott is a co-inventor of the popular board game Trivial Pursuit. He built Devil's Pulpit with the proceeds. He feels he's not to blame.
Well done, Mark.
Well, I'm told that there are people throughout the town of Caledon who say that the water table is down here in the last several years, whether because of a succession of dry summers or simply because of the development that's gone on here in the last 15 to 25 years.
There are many communities around Toronto where what they find is that they place too many demands on the groundwater. So in fact, the last person in manages to suck up enough of it that nobody has any water. It's happened not only in situations where you might have a golf course that in fact is using the water resources, but you've also got it in the region of York where the region is tapped into great underground artesian wells, and sure enough, local people are running out of water.
When communities engineer to extract water replace communities that conserve it, even the deepest wells run dry.
We'll come back with new plans for city living.
Knock out one piece of the natural community on the moraine, and the whole thing falls apart. It's happened before. During the last century, settlers came up the hills and cleared land that seemed so fertile. Once the trees were gone, the thin topsoil blew away, exposing the sand and the gravel beneath. Many settlers found they'd made a terrible mistake. Creeks dried up as the water table dropped, and hundreds of farms were abandoned to the blowing sand. This forest, just outside the city, was part of that desert when Jim and Alwyn Walker first came here 50 years ago. Soon after they were married, they bought an abandoned farm and began to grow tree seedlings to reforest it. They were part of a larger movement. In the 1940s and 50s, thousands of Boy Scouts and school children planted trees in eroded soils right across the moraine. This is the forest Jim and Alwyn Walker restored. 2 million trees on 400 hectares. Even to them, it's remarkable.
It's just that the contrast between what we're seeing now and what we saw 40 or 50 years ago up here is so astonishing. It was completely barren, bare, windswept, and with almost nothing growing in great patches of it. And now we're sitting here in the center of one of the plantations the trees are up straight for 30, 40 feet. I think it's just really amazing.
Give them the birds something to sit on.
You were just listening to a bird singing there, and certainly that no such bird was either here or sang in those days.
The walkers helped a place revive itself. Trees created soil, brought back plants and animals. Trees raised the water table. Springs bubbled through the glacial sand again, and the water fed more growth. Now, the life restored to the moraine is being removed again, only this time it's by design. Suburban development does more than just cut down the forest. Its changes go deep. Water mains, power cables, sewers. Building codes require the best infrastructure money can buy. Surface grading makes rainfall run off quickly. Culverts carry away streams. Engineering takes apart the way a place works naturally. Like it or not, these days if you want a newly built house, suburbia is generally your only option. But this toy town is a far cry from what people thought they would get when the movement out to the city's edge began 40 years ago. Andres Duaney is an architect and urban planner.
Well, suburbia was originally conceived as a place that could join the best aspects of country living and city living. It was actually, one can identify its origins in the English Garden City movement. And they specifically said the cities are terrible and polluted, the country is boring and without opportunity. But there is a way of living in country towns which would have the advantages of city living, sophistication, lights, culture, neighbors, and the advantage of country living. And what has been lost is the complexity of the idea. And it has simply become, in my opinion, you have all the disadvantages of country living and all the disadvantages of city living. You have the culture of a cow town and you have the traffic of a metropolis. Exactly the wrong combination. The streets of suburbia are places where cars are happy. They flow freely, they're very wide, they can move relatively quickly. Suburban streets are relatively noxious to pedestrians.
Ecologist Peter Bird blames urban sprawl on the car.
The fact that the suburbs exist in the first place is because of the cheapness of fossil fuel in the late 1940s through the middle 70s. Because there was fossil fuels, developers could put houses out into what formerly had been cow pastures and move people out of them. Of course, now the inner city has grown all the way out to the suburbs, and the suburbs continue being layered on the outside of the circle.
Everything is pushed aside as the city spreads, converting fertile land into subdivisions designed around the car. This kind of housing uses up a lot of land. Planning codes encourage low densities, and detached houses on large lots with double or triple garages are everywhere. All those cars are the consequence of the planning codes as well. Residential areas are separated from shops and businesses, and low densities make public transport impractical. An average family makes many car trips every day through the maze, at great cost to their budget and to their environment. Farmland paved, watershed taken apart. Those costs are hard to get hold of. But in simple dollar terms, the pipes and cables and roads, the infrastructure which makes suburbia possible, are now beyond our collective purse. The freeway, the great symbol of modern life, turns out to be anything but free. Andres Duaney.
There's hardly anything more expensive than building highways. If you knew the costs per mile of a highway, you would be horrified. It's it's many schools per mile. Every mile that you see of highway has cost schools. The fact that we were able to build as many highways as we did comes from a period of unnatural affluence, which is no longer with us. And we can no longer afford building highways. What we can afford is to be more intelligent. The only thing we can afford now is to go back to the older system, and that is, of course, to build villages and neighborhoods again and not highways to connect them.
Small villages, town centers, inner city neighborhoods. They're places where everything is connected to everything else, where you can work and shop and play without getting in a car. However we design the living space, the fact is most cities are growing rapidly. Toronto planners expect 50% more people over the next 30 years, and we have to find a place for them to live. John Sewell thinks we should grow where we already live, and that will take some creative thinking.
What we're going to have to do is obviously make do with the existing infrastructure and use it to accommodate more people. So that's going to be one of the real pushes toward some form of intensification. But I think environmentally as well, people are beginning to think that spread simply doesn't solve the problem, it creates the problem. People have seen that not only in terms of the disappearance of green space of various kinds, natural features, but also in terms of air quality and automobiles. And they're trying to say, how can we get urban forms that don't rely so much on day-to-day use of automobiles?
High-rise housing is one way we've tried in the past to increase density, but it has disadvantages. Building high-rises often means destroying existing neighborhoods without creating new ones, and many people want to live closer to the ground. Downtown shopping streets in many cities have hidden possibilities. These stores already have apartments over them. Add 2 or 3 more stories, and you'd get vibrant Main Street communities like those in European cities. There are many models. Row housing, built 100 years ago, provides high densities along with privacy, gardens, and a sense of place. But returning to this isn't quite as easy as it sounds. Anders Dwayne.
One can't just declare, well, I want to build a traditional neighborhood or a village and just expect to design it and get it permitted. Because over the years, essentially since the Second World War, the codes and rules have been changed incrementally. Each little change with a perfectly good intention. Let's make the streets a little bit wider, let's separate commercial from residential, let's prevent alleys. Incrementally, one bit at a time, they have made traditional neighborhoods illegal. The codes are not neutral. The codes have suburbia in mind. That which you see surrounding Toronto, the shopping centers, the office parks, the housing subdivisions, all that asphalt, that is not laissez-faire. That is by intention. That's what the planners have in mind, and that is what happens. Codes are very powerful instruments. You can code suburbia. By the same token, if let's say a province or a section or a city would want to change itself, by changing the codes you could change the model. And within a very short time you would be having neighborhoods and villages again.
Human habitat. Changing the rules will help to reconnect us to the sources of life. Calling a halt to urban sprawl means deciding what we value most and then laying down the law to protect it. John Sewell.
I think it's going to be really important that we be clear about what we mean by protecting the environment and state it up front. So if we find that what we want to do is protect river valleys as an example or other natural features, we actually say it. Or if we're trying to protect wetlands, we say it. Maybe we want to say that when you're developing anything, you have to increase biodiversity. You can't decrease it. You have to plant more varieties of plants than were there originally. You have to try and get more kind of bugs in the water, those kinds of things. And we'd actually start building cities that were much more environmentally conscious than we ever thought possible.
I'm always told, listen, we can't afford to protect the environment if we don't have a strong, healthy economy. And we're always presented the economy as against the environment. There's a dichotomy between the two.
What we really need to do is bring together those people who understand this principle. And that principle is that the economy and the environment are not mutually exclusive events. They are mutually interdependent. They must be brought together. You can't walk in, use up, throw away, and move on. There is a contribution that you've got to make sure that the next generation at least has, as a minimum, has the choices you had. Otherwise, you're just a scavenger.
Every city must solve the same problems and find its own way to transform itself. Peter Berg.
The kinds of changes that we have to undertake to reverse what cities are currently doing to the planet are going to come about from either of two sources. Either because we decide to do them in the name of grace, cooperation, beauty, a sense of heightened livability, or because they're forced on us, because the faucet runs rust, because when you turn on the gas stove, the gas doesn't come on, because the lights go out, because the food is too expensive. It's either going to be one way or another. The choice really is ours. I'm not talking about one political party over another. I'm talking about a shift in the emphasis of civilization. We have to develop a human species on a planet together idea of mutualism and an immediately local idea of participating with the life systems around us. And what we have to do to succeed at this point is to stop participating as we have in the past in overwhelming nature and succeed at being sustainable, which is a whole new era for humankind.
David said he will be right back.
Okay, I just